Do you prefer the safety of a cage with guaranteed food or the freedom of a sky where you need to hunt to survive? Most people choose the cage and call it stability, without realizing that the owner of the cage can decide not to feed you tomorrow. Today, you will discover with this story how your fear of taking risks is exactly what is funding the wealth of the person who hired you. Roberto felt a fleeting relief every time his salary was deposited into his account. But that relief lasted only as long as it took to pay the bills. He believed his salary was a safe harbor, a guarantee that life was under control and in order. Deep down, that monthly amount worked like a dose of anesthesia, preventing him from feeling the pain of his own financial stagnation. He traded 40 hours a week of his life for crumbs that barely covered the costs of continuing to survive. The security he valued so much was, in fact, the handcuff that prevented him from building something truly great. Roberto's routine was a cycle of effort for a return that never grew in the same proportion. He found himself trapped in the snare of working to fulfill the dreams of a boss he didn't even truly admire. With every insignificant raise, he felt more grateful, without noticing that inflation had already devoured that purchasing power. He was selling his most precious asset for next to nothing, while time passed without any mercy. The false sense of stability robbed him of the hunger to undertake and the courage to seek more profitable paths. He looked at the calendar and counted the days until vacation, like a prisoner counting the days until time in the sun. This constant waiting for moments of rest is the greatest sign that professional life has become a heavy burden. Roberto didn't realize that the steady paycheck was the price he accepted to give up his geographic and financial freedom. He was building a sandcastle on land that belonged to someone else. But an unexpected notice at the company would make him feel the chill of uncertainty for the first time. Roberto always saw childhood colleagues taking risks, failing, and finally reaching levels he considered unattainable for himself. While they forged their own destiny, Roberto was proud of never having gone through a severe and immediate financial tight spot. He didn't understand that the greatest hardship is reaching 60 years old, realizing you never owned your own hours of life. Comfort was the drug that kept his ambition asleep while his youth was drained by a badge hanging around his neck. The fear of losing the little he had prevented him from seeing the ocean of abundance that exists for those who decide to undertake. He felt safe in his cubicle, ignoring that the market is a jungle that does not respect the loyalty of those who do not generate value. Roberto believed that seniority was a shield, but he discovered that, for the company, he was just a cost line. Stability is an illusion created to keep the productive masses under control and afraid to question their own mediocrity. He was trading his ability to become wealthy for an emotional survival basket that kept him always one step behind. Every Sunday night, a deep anguish took over his chest, a clear sign that his soul rejected that routine. He tried to drown out that voice with cheap entertainment and conversations about soccer, escaping the reality that he was a slave to the system. The salary he received was just the fuel necessary for him to return to work the next morning. He realized he was running on a treadmill. He made great effort, but remained exactly in the same place. The anguish Roberto felt on Sunday nights was not just tiredness, but the omen that his safe harbor was numbered. He began to notice the signs that the company no longer saw him as an essential employee, but as a disposable number on a spreadsheet of cuts. That sense of stability, which once calmed him, now seemed like a glass shield about to shatter at the slightest sign of external crisis. He realized he had spent years polishing the chains of his own cage, naively believing that the key holder would take care of him forever. The fear of dismissal, which he had once avoided facing, now knocked at his door with a force he could no longer ignore or pretend did not exist. The final shock came in a 5-minute meeting, where 10 years of dedication were summed up in a handshake and a comment of, "Thank you very much for your services." In that moment, the silence of the office seemed deafening as Roberto processed that his security was, in fact, a temporary permission granted by another man. He saw his identity as a model employee crumble, revealing a man who, despite years of hard work, possessed nothing solid that was truly his. The humiliation of being discarded like an obsolete piece was the necessary fuel for a legitimate revolt to finally sprout in his tired chest. He understood that he had been loyal to a system that never intended to be loyal to him or to his deepest dreams. As he walked through the company door for the last time, Roberto felt the weight of every opportunity he himself had suffocated in the name of comfort and false stability. He was no longer the man who counted the days until vacation, but someone forced to face the market with the hunger of one who needs to build his own destiny from scratch. The freedom he feared so much was now his only reality, and the initial panic began to give way to a strategic and transformative clarity. He realized that the fixed salary was the collar that kept him tame, preventing him from showing his true strength and ambition to the world. The journey toward real prosperity was beginning in that exact second of uncertainty, and he would accept nothing less than total control of his life. With the severance pay in his pocket and his pride wounded, Roberto had to make the most difficult decision of his life: look for another owner or become the master of his own path. He observed that most people, when fired, run desperately to hand out resumes, begging for a new cage slightly more comfortable. Roberto decided to break this vicious cycle and began to study how money really moves in the hands of those who control assets. He realized that wealth does not flow to those who work harder physically, but to those who solve big problems for the greatest number of people possible. The key to prosperity was not in a new badge, but in the ability to turn his skill into a profitable and scalable business. He began to see the market no longer as a place to seek shelter, but as a battlefield where only producers truly survive and prosper. Roberto started dedicating the hours he once gave to the company to building his own brand, his own system, and his own network of strategic contacts. He understood that while the employee focuses on cost, the entrepreneur focuses on profit and the constant expansion of his perceived value. The transition was painful, requiring him to kill the little employee that inhabited his mind to make room for a man of broad vision. Every no he received on his new journey served only to sharpen his resilience and his hunger for absolute victory. The discipline he used to arrive early at work was now applied with triple the intensity to his own life projects. He discovered that true freedom demands much stricter self-management than any boss would ever dare demand from him in years of service. Roberto no longer accepted the idea of having a ceiling on his earnings, because now he was responsible for defining the size of his own sky. Roberto began to notice something his old job had hidden. Profit is much better than salary. While salary is limited by a contract, profit is limited only by your ability to scale and solve real problems in the market. He saw that by selling a solution instead of selling his hours, he had finally broken the glass ceiling that kept him in the lower middle class. Money began to come in volumes he had never imagined possible through an ordinary end-of-month paycheck. He was not just earning more. He was learning to make money work for him, and not the other way around. Roberto's greatest victory was not his growing bank balance, but the profound change in how he was seen by society and by himself. He stopped being the man who asked permission to travel or to spend time with family, becoming the architect of his own schedule. The confidence he now exuded attracted high-level business partners, people he once saw only on the covers of success magazines. He realized that the security he feared losing so much was, in fact, the biggest obstacle preventing him from accessing this new layer of abundance. Roberto's worldview expanded so much that the old office now seemed like a distant and claustrophobic memory of a small life. This new phase brought the understanding that prosperity is a frequency that requires constant courage and a relentless pursuit of excellence. Roberto stopped looking at the price of things and began focusing on the freedom that capital could buy for his future and his lineage. He understood that getting rich is not an event of luck, but a mathematical process of generating value and retaining wealth with strategic intelligence. The fear of failure still existed, but now it was used as fuel for innovation and never again as an anchor for paralysis. Roberto looked at his journey and realized that the greatest gain was not in material goods, but in the peace of mind of never again needing a favor. He was now the man who provided opportunities, the pillar that supported not only his family, but also the dreams of those who worked alongside him. Dependence on a flawed system was replaced by a solid structure that he himself designed, brick by brick, with the strength of his new mindset. He understood that true wealth is having the power to say no to anything that harms his values or limits his freedom. The old Roberto, who lived anxiously for payday, had given way to a strategist who mastered his own time and destiny. Roberto's influence began to overflow to the people around him, who now saw him as living proof that stability is a choice, not a position. He began mentoring others who were still trapped in the same snare in which he had lived for 10 long years of blindness. Seeing the spark of change in the eyes of those who were once resigned to mediocrity became his greatest personal and professional satisfaction. He proved that scarcity only has power over those who accept the rules imposed by fear and the search for immediate security. The prosperity he achieved was merely the external reflection of a revolution that first happened inside his mind, hungry for victory. Roberto's horizon now had no limits because he had learned the art of creating value from absolute zero. He no longer feared economic crises or market changes, for his security was deposited in his own ability to adapt and create. The man who once feared unemployment now laughed at his own shadow, knowing that the world will always have a place for those who decide to own the game. He had reached the level where money was just a tool to expand his vision and leave a lasting impact on the earth. However, one final lesson was still missing to seal his commitment to eternal wealth and freedom. The last piece of the puzzle fit into place when Roberto realized that enrichment was not about what he had, but about who he became to conquer all that. The discipline, focus, and courage he forged in the fire of uncertainty became his greatest asset, something no crisis or dismissal could take from him. He looked at the past, not with regret, but with the gratitude of someone who survived a shipwreck and learned to build his own ocean liner. The man who once settled for crumbs was now the owner of the banquet, and his presence in any environment exuded the authority of someone who owes nothing to anyone. Prosperity had ceased to be a distant goal and had become the air he breathed every day. He finally understood that stability is an illusion, the weak use to justify a lack of ambition, while the strong create their own security through constant movement. Roberto no longer worked to survive, but to expand an empire that would serve as a foundation for the next generations of his lineage. The fear of the future was replaced by the excitement of creating new realities, knowing that he held the secret code of value creation. Every decision now made was based on freedom and growth, never again on scarcity or the need for others' approval. He had broken the mental chains that imprison millions and, by doing so, opened the portal to a life of limitless wealth and deep meaning. Today, Roberto is living proof that a man's greatest wealth is his absolute autonomy over his time and his choices. He no longer looks at the clock waiting for the end of the workday, because every second of his life is dedicated to something he loves and completely masters. The success he achieved is the inevitable result of having chosen the discomfort of evolution instead of the comfort of safe stagnation. He turned the pain of dismissal into the fuel for his glory, proving that the end of a job can, in fact, be your freedom. The cycle of poverty was buried, and the reign of abundance began, sealing a destiny of victory that no one will be able to erase. Roberto's life is not a fairy tale. It is a truth that happens when you decide that your fear of remaining poor is greater than your fear of taking risks. You can continue sitting, waiting for your company to value you, or for luck to knock on your door. But the truth is that time is running, and it does not forgive cowardice. The security you think you have today is just an illusion that can disappear in a 5-minute meeting on Monday morning. How long will you finance someone else's dreams while your own plans rot in the drawer? The world owes you nothing, and prosperity only hands over the keys to those who have the courage to seize them through a change in mindset. If you feel you were born to be the pillar of your family and not just another number on a payroll sheet, the time to act is now. The first step to getting rich is not having money, but having the audacity to no longer accept the mediocre life imposed on you until now. False security is the greatest lie of the century, and you will only be truly free when you decide that you are the sole owner of your financial destiny. Enough excuses and enough living on crumbs while the banquet of abundance is served to those who dare. If you have decided that today is the last day of your life as a hostage of a fixed salary, comment below. I am the owner of my freedom. Subscribe so you don't miss the next step of your enrichment journey, because your empire will not build itself while you sleep in your comfort zone. Your turning point began in this video. Now get up and go claim what is yours by right. See you in the next video, where we will reveal why some prosper and you do not. Through the story of Marcos,